Hello and welcome. My name is Angel Moronte. I'm the president of the SGA at the Lake Lona campus here at Valencia. And this is my lovely co-host, Brett.
Hey guys, nice to meet you. I'm a wellness ambassador at the Winter Park campus, and welcome to the third installment of the Freeish Conversations at Valencia College.
For any of our new viewers, Freeish is a conjunction of conversations that tackles the social issues presented in our community in regards to race and assumptions that some of us aren't free. Today's discussion is going to be focused on what what it is to be an ally and what you can do to support this movement. To start us off, we're going to introduce our lovely panelists, Director of Student Development, Charlie S. Miguel.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. Nice to have you here.
Nice to have you as well. It's nice to be had. Nice to be had. You guys have been doing an amazing job, and I'm happy to be able to support.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Next, we are going to introduce the Executive Dean of the Ponciana campus, Dr. Jennifer Robertson.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here today.
Right.
And then we also have Barry Congressi, who is the Coordinator of Student Development.
Yes, thanks for having me here. I appreciate getting to join the conversation.
And we also have Quentin Neal from the other side of the United States, joining us from South Puget Sound Community College. He's the Director of the Diversity Inclusion Office. Welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you, guys. So we want to be talking about what it means to be an ally and allyship during today's conversation. So to define it, allyship is the practice of emphasizing social justice, inclusion, and human rights by members of an in-group to advance the interests of an oppressed or marginalized out-group. So it's a part of the anti-oppression or anti-racist conversation, which puts us into the social justice theory and ideal conversation. So we want to remember that allyship is a verb, not a noun. So we need to take intentional action to support and facilitate the voice of the systematically oppressed. So there's a definition, and being an ally, we shouldn't just use that as a title because it requires action. And so I'm going to open up some of the questions for you guys in regards to that. I'll start with Dr. Robertson. What does it mean to you to be an ally in this movement? Or could you maybe define in your own words allyship first?
Yes, thanks, Brett. So when I first heard the word ally, of course, I think of countries that are being allies for one another. But to me, it's a much deeper partnership. It goes deeper than advocacy of a specific issue. Allyship to me means that you're willing to stand by someone shoulder to shoulder, united in a cause, regardless if that cause has impacted you directly. So, for example, for me as a white female, I can't say I know what it means to be Black in America, but I can seek out information, make friends, partner with colleagues that they can educate me so I can try to understand the experiences of others. And unfortunately, there's a lot of individuals who can't see other perspectives and they're unwilling to even try. Their belief system is very strong. So our work as allies is really try to break down those barriers. And unfortunately, sometimes that means creating divides between even family and friends. But to me, true allyship means staying the course even when things get difficult.
Agreed. I can speak from personal experience from being a white male. I have no idea personally, nor will I ever get the exact perspective. But like you said, educating yourself, I feel like that is where anybody can start to be an ally so that we are on the same page. Charlie, can I ask you to define allyship in your own words and how people can be allies in the movement?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Dr. Robertson, actually, I want to pick up right where you left off at. I love that, the fact that you stressed the idea of education. And then I would actually couple that with education without the expectation of understanding, right? Like when we consistently talk about these multiple identities and understanding that people hold a variety of multiple identities in relation to themselves and how they see themselves in the world. I see at times there seems to be this expectation, whether that's personal, one's own personal expectation, or maybe kind of a social expectation, that because I'm educating myself, I now understand. You may not, right? Like you may read all the books and attend all the conferences and do all of these things in pursuit of being, and kind of to your point, Brett, in answering the question, in pursuit of being an ally, but you may never get to the point where you truly understand, right? And to me, I think an ally, kind of understands that, right? Like this may not, you may not end where you start, you may not end where you think you thought you were going to at the beginning of this process of being an ally. It's more about the journey and not necessarily about the destination. And as well, to Dr. Roberts' point, it's being able to stand shoulder to shoulder. I once had somebody sit down with me, and I might be taking a little bit of thunder on this, and the people who know me have heard me say this before, but I once had somebody sit down with me and tell me that they don't need an ally, they need an accomplice. And that to me meant a lot, because at the end of the day, to that verb versus noun, ally sounds great when I'm having a conversation telling you about all the things I've been a part of. An accomplice means you can call me and expect to get a voice on the other end of that phone, or somebody to sit down with you and have a conversation, or just be there to listen to what's going on. Again, without the expectation of necessarily understanding, just to say that I'm here. So when you ask me about what I look at for allyship, that's what I look at, is just that, somebody who is genuinely connected to this process, not that kind of false or generic push forward with this expectation that I'm going to find something out new and brave and different. I just care about somebody else, and I'm going to connect to that person I care about and roll with them on that.
Charlie, you say that, and I honestly feel that, because I feel like allyship is not only you being a part of the movement, it's also being personally connected to the community. And when you say that you need someone that answers the call on the other side when you call, that's really deep, because that's something that comes into your life every day, that you want to have that person that understands you and that knows everything you're going through. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Barry, can I get your definition of allyship and maybe some actions that an ally can take to be a part of the movement?
So I think a big part of the allyship piece, you already done a great job of touching on between Dr. Ensminger and Dr. Robertson. I think that it really is putting skin in the game, so to say, and being the one who's in that fight. And even when the fight gets rough, still being in there and standing ground and saying, I'm not leaving, I'm going to be a part of this, because I recognize that things that are happening are wrong and they need to change. It happens on so many fronts. So I really think, being an ally, it truly does come down to that, more than words, but the actions that are behind it. A piece of it, I think, that I find in terms of things you can do, a lot of times we see, the people who are against the movements are almost like this faceless mass sometimes. It becomes very difficult to think, well, how do I go up against that? And I think one of the big misnomers is thinking that the way to face it is by going against these strangers and trying to change their minds, where it's more about taking the personal relationships that you have and spreading the knowledge that you've learned and helping others to understand that what's going on. So an example that I would give is I can connect to friends and to family and explain the perspectives and the things that I know. And as they kind of see the perspectives they may not have noticed before, then they can share those to their connections and so on and so forth. And it spreads like a spider web from whoever's the ally at the center who's really utilizing their voice. It will take a very long time for me to reach somebody who's on the other side of the United States and change their mind. But through some degrees of separation, there is a chance that along the way it can happen. It just takes that continued effort over time.
Excellent. I completely resonate with what you're saying. In your own personal community that you have, that's where you have the action. And that even just conversations with your friends and family, which are the most difficult, I would say, because they're not strangers. They're people that you value their opinion, but you feel like you guys don't agree on some things. That's the most challenging for me specifically in waking up to this movement. And it's also the most painful because you realize that they're not seeing the same thing as you. And how could they not? And then, like I said, I'm just waking up. So people are coming into this knowledge at all different points. And I think that the conversations, like you said, Barry, are so pivotal in people's understanding. Um, I wonder if Quentin, is there any other actions, other than conversation? Because I know a lot of people are tired of hearing conversation as like an answer for this. Um, Keeping in mind, it's always education is helpful, but Quentin, are there any other actions or any other ways to be an ally that you would mention?
Yeah. So I want to really unpack um, the allyship and accomplice thing, right? So that we can understand the temperature of maybe where you see yourself, right? So when we think about allyship is the engagement of wanting to engage in activism against whatever underrepresented group you're trying to advocate for, right? And really be alongside them like we've all agreed on. And what it means to be an accomplice means you're actually going to stand with them to dismantle those oppressive structures, right? And so we have to, I think, for folks who don't identify within a particular underrepresented group, you have to figure out where you lie. And it's okay to be honest about that, right? Where I'm like, I'm not an accomplice yet, but I'm an ally because I'm trying to figure out how this all works. And I think we have to hold ourselves to that, right? So what does it mean to be a white person wanting to really get in there and do the work? Well, allyship means, okay, let me try to engage in activism in some way to understand, which is meaning that I'm not actually putting a labor on that group. I'm doing it myself. By the time I get the understanding and the tools, I can move somewhat into an accomplice framework to really be able to dismantle those structures, right? And so what does that mean? Dismantling means using your privilege to basically make sure that that particular individual or group of folks are being heard and represented by using your privilege. Like, what does it mean to use your white privilege? What it means to be a male in a group talking about women, right? As a collective, right? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a gay male and hearing men in general talk about women, right? It's just so very intersectional. So I think what I would focus on from my perspective is figuring out where your temperature is and not jumping too quickly into it, but mostly trying to figure out that you are signing up to do the work and figuring out where you are, not putting the labor on other people to do it for you, but making sure that you are doing the work yourself. So you have to check in with yourself. And, it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast and something that I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he was also a Black queer individual. And he said that particularly the times we're in, right? The racial tensions that are, emotions are high. And he said, it's interesting because when I ask white folks, how do you feel? It seems as though that they tend to click into this, well, I think, and it's like, no, wait a minute. I need you to tap into like, how do you feel? Because we get very analytical about our thinking. Instead of saying, no, this makes me feel uncomfortable. It makes me feel like I don't know what to do. And that's okay. Like that's a step, right? Into figuring out where to navigate. So I think just taking that little tidbit into like how we think about being an ally versus an accomplice, people of all underrepresented groups want people to be an accomplice to advocate and really dismantle oppressive structures. But I think individuals have to be honest where they lie. Like right now, I'm in an allyship space and I need to get to an accomplice, but I need to do the work to get there, right? But I'm not putting the labor on the individuals or the group to do it for me. So I just wanted to kind of flesh that out contextually to really hopefully make it a little bit more simple and maybe food for thought, so to speak. So,
Quinn, I'd like to jump in because I have a similar path to make it even simpler. I feel like, you know, one of the most important steps is self-awareness. So if you can get people to the point where they are aware of either their own racist language or actions or thoughts, and it could be something so flippant that they don't even realize it, or if, you know, if they are a very open individual, self-aware in the terms of being thoughtful about it. So for example, my background's in international education, and my entire career, I've always been focused on, you know, bridging cultural divides and trying to teach people to be accepting of other cultures and nationalities and politics, all of those things. What I realized is I really was so focused outside of our borders. So being invited to this panel made me realize that I haven't been focused within our borders, you know, within the structures of our society that does disadvantage many different populations, you know, from, you mentioned like women and the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ community. So I think, you know, one of the most important things is having that self-awareness. It goes back to what Charlie was saying about, of course, and I mentioned earlier about education, but it is a step beyond that, and really coming to grips with your own self and being realistic about your maybe downfalls and not meeting the challenges, but at that same tone also being ready to take on the challenge if you are ready for that.
Definitely, I totally agree with you. Piggyback out of something you guys were saying, out of what you guys were saying about talking to people about the whole issue about having to tell family how you feel about the actual movement and making things maybe uncomfortable for them, but it's a talk that is necessary for us to have to move on. I want to ask Queen specifically, if, and then I will move on to any of you, to all of you. How can people who do not self-identify as Black become allies to the movement? Like, what is your opinion on that? Like, what do you think is a good way for people to become allies?
There's a lot, you know, and I think, first of all, and I think for me, it's interesting because I just came from a panel from my own institution, as Charlie knows, about what does it mean institutionally, what are some oppressive things that we're still operating in, and when it comes to policy and hiring practices, and, you know, and I was on that panel, and I put myself on the line to tell the truth, but, you know, I'm unapologetic about it. But I think what folks that don't identify as Black can do, and I've seen this happen, is you can't take anything personal. You just cannot take anything personal. To give Black folks the space to be angry, and also give them the space to speak. It's also important to hear all Black voices in the movement, not just one group. But I also think it's important for folks that don't really understand to figure out, where do you lie on, how do you show up in your activism? Like, I think that's something to really think about. It's like, so how do you show up? You know, when you're in meetings, when you're in groups with friends, like I just don't tolerate stuff. Like I just call, like, that's just how I was brought up because my family is from the South. So we just get straight to it. But I also have been brought up with a lot of activist individuals around. So it was just very second nature to me. So I think it's important for us to really start by calling things out. Or we could say calling people into the conversation that might feel uncomfortable for them as it looks like calling them out. Um, and what does that look like? I think you have to do it in a way that for people that are in that space trying to receive it, I think it's just really important for us to really look at um, where do you lie on the meter? Um, and I go to mostly right now, because I'm talking mostly about race, you know, but I think from a racial perspective, like white identified as well as Black folks, is this, you know, the 8 white identities, which really shows you a meter of where do you lie on this meter of are you still in white supremacy? Are you trying to get to, are you still operating white privilege? You know, and how do you get to being a white abolitionist, right? How do you get to a place to really get to wanting to dismantle, as we would say, the master's house, right? So that's one. I think for people of color that don't identify as Black, I think this is the time for you to really think a little bit about how much knowledge do you really have to know about that particular group. And that also goes as well with folks who identify as white. So that's kind of where I'm operating in right now, because one thing that I'm starting to realize with a lot of the conversations is that people are so quick to really want to have very nuanced conversations, but no one's still understanding the foundational understanding of anything. And it's like, oh yeah, you know, what it means to be Black and non-binary and all these things. But I'm like, you still don't even understand what white supremacy is. Like, we need to start right there before we get to a very complex conversation. It's like school. It's like you went from first grade jump to 12th. No, that's not how that works in this process. So I think learning needs to really happen, but is another component to it. And I know I'm kind of all over, but it's just my brain moving pretty quickly in my head. But I hopefully that gives you some ideas, some contextualization around what can we do? Like Jennifer said, you know, you need to be self-aware. You do. You need to be very much self-aware. And that's number one. You can't take things personal. And to be honest, I'm putting it out there. Charlie know I'm very honest about things. I was on a panel at the institution and I was in a meeting like 2 days later and found out that there are some white folks that thought I was an angry Black person, you know? And they're like, yeah, you know, Q. I'm like, I know what I signed up for, you know? The truth has to be told, you know? People of color, particularly Black folks, we're not here to massage anybody's crazy. We're not here to massage and deal with your, like, we're not here to really have to check on your emotions because we have to already live this on an everyday basis. And it's an honor, right, when we do kind of get in that mode of wanting to really check in on your emotions. Like, we don't have to. So I think it's just really important. And it goes for the other side is when we're talking about the conversation between folks who identify as male and female. Like, it's not women's job to check in on how men feel if they did something. It's not their job to do that. So I just want us to think about what it looks like from a very racial perspective. So that's a little bit.
Uh, Charlie, I was actually just gonna go up to you. He says he was talking about educating the people and that you don't go from first grade to 12th grade. And I feel like that's something you mentioned at the start about having this whole process. Rome wasn't built in a day, and educating people is what is one of the first steps that we should take into consideration when tackling this issue. So how do you feel about how can people that want to be allies become allies in this movement?
So thank you for that Perry, and I apologize if it seems like Quinn and I have done this a couple times before. We have, so it's an ongoing conversation for a few years now. So I want to pick up on some of that and answer your question, Angel. So I love when you said be self-aware. I would add be honest. Self-awareness and honesty. Sometimes it seems like they're two things that live two peas in the same pod. I don't know if that's true, and maybe I'm just speaking from my own perch, my own perspective. I think people strive for self-awareness, but without an understanding of like that true honesty, often don't accomplish what it is that they're after. I love the fact that you said don't take things personal. Ironically enough, like again, Quinn and I have had similar experiences in the same institution, where calling somebody out, erupts into this. It goes from being this conversation to this more very personal defensive posturing, where where the person can't see past the fact that they think that they're this accusation over their head, when you're simply just calling a situation what it is or how you see it. And I would add to that to tell the truth, right? Something that's easily said, right? Tell the truth is often just not done, especially in just kind of pairing again off of when we talk about that idea between ally and being an accomplice, and being able to deconstruct certain systems inside of your spaces based off of your privilege. Being able to tell the truth isn't always a glorious position to be in. I think as scholar practitioners in this room, that's something that we often run across when we are diving into our own research, and you start investigating and doing that critical analysis and realize like, wait, this isn't what I thought it was. And being able to voice that. Kind of getting back, because I can get a little far out there, but getting back to the question at hand, I don't know if it's necessarily for folks to identify. I don't need folks to identify me to recognize me, or to identify with me to recognize me. You don't have to, and I kind of lean back on this, you really don't have to know my path to understand the group that I am in and the situations that plague us. The cycle of poverty isn't to be argued based off of, my interaction within it or that other person's interaction within it. This is something that is proven. We've seen it time and time again. Just recognize that. You don't have to be a part of the movement to recognize the social injustices that are taking place and the, really just the issues, right? Like that we see in society every day with being a person of color. As a light-skinned Black man, I often am confused with being Latino or this or that, and which is fine. But at the end of the day, I still fit inside of a marginalized and underrepresented population that is disadvantaged almost at every corner. And I get it, right? Like the idea of like, how are you here if you're disadvantaged? I know that conversation too. But at the end of the day, I don't need those folks to identify with me so much. It's just to recognize this is the system that we are currently in, recognize their place within it, recognize where they can make a change and impact that change, and then really work on that idea of being that ally. This movement is just that, but it's also a marathon, not a race. And so there's no like, you got to wake up tomorrow and figure out what you got to do and do it really well, right? Like it's dedicating yourself to the recognition, maybe in the pursuit of identity, so that one day we can sit down at a table and have a conversation like that, a challenging conversation where truths can be told, and people can put out how they actually perceive things. Believe it or not all of us, perceive situations to be the same all the time, and put out how they see it and have a real honest, intellectual, emotional conversation where we're not pulling away from that table feeling like somebody came at me sideways. That would kind of be my address on that.
That's a great answer. Guys, I want to inform you that we're a little bit under the time limit, so I'm gonna quickly go ahead and ask Barry for his take on this question. And I want to see what's your opinion.
Perfect. So I actually want to could jump back into where Charlie was and talking about the honesty and the truth part of it. One thing that I really come to terms with, especially over the course of the last few months, is the misinformation campaigns that exist are just phenomenally loud on all sides. And I think one of the hardest pieces, especially in the conversations that I've had, have been where people aren't critical of what they hear and they accept what they hear the first time as the truth. And so they don't go to look for more and dive deeper. And I think that's, you almost end up in this echo chamber of, you and your friends all listen to the same thing or watch the same thing, you hear the same things, and so you accept that as your truth. And it becomes very difficult to break that until somebody comes into your circle who interrupts the flow of that conversation and says, well, wait a minute, have you looked at this perspective over here? And I find that conversation is happening less and less frequently when it needs to happen, especially as we've kind of entered this virtual space where we're all siloed in our homes more often than not. Having those kind of free-flowing conversations has become even more difficult. So it really takes that person who's the ally to really kind of branch out and go out of their way to try to have those conversations, to bring that perspective. So I'll say, I try to avoid Facebook at all costs, but I find that when I go on Facebook, it's walls of misinformation on every side. And I see people who I look at them and I think, I know that you are an intelligent person. I know you're smart. I've had conversations with you. How is this the perspective that you have? And I'll have a side conversation with them, and it'll sometimes take hours of debating back and forth before it clicks that maybe they don't know everything. And it takes so long to break that down because people think they understand and they accept that as their truth. And so a lot of times that truth and honesty isn't as clearly defined as what we think it is. So I think that's kind of a hard piece to really look at is the conversations are just so difficult to have when there's so much misinformation. And it almost takes an organized front. I look at, the Black Lives Matter movement and, even this series, Freeish, an organized movement to introduce information and perspectives to people to kind of break that norm that they're in. And I think that's just paramount, is so vital to changing the mindsets, especially now more than ever. So that's my piece I'd like to add to that.
Oh, that's a great answer. Jennifer, do you have anything to add to that?
So I would just add, of course, I echo all of the sentiments of the panel. I would just say, for the last question, in terms of what can you do as an ally, I think it's important to find something that you feel comfortable with. Not everybody needs to be marching in the street. You might want to sew masks that are branded. You might want to make phone calls. You might want to just speak up when you normally would stay silent. So I think it's really important that you find a way to contribute to this cause, to these conversations, but in a way that you feel comfortable with, that fits your personality, that fits your talents even. If you want to build a website or, create a Facebook page that has more realistic information. So I think that would be one of the things that I wanted to mention to the group.
Definitely. I thank you so much for your answer. I want to thank everyone in this panel. You guys have been amazing. Brett, if you want to come on and say thank you as well, it's so welcome.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for bringing self-awareness to even us in the panel, and especially at Valencia College with the Freeish conversations. We've had a couple in the summer, and we're going to have more in fall. So please stay tuned if this conversation is something that you're interested in and you're looking to be an ally. Thank you guys very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Hello, Valencia family. Welcome back to another episode of Freeish. This is episode number 4. My name is Denasia, and co-hosting with me is the amazing Miss Anjanette. And of course, we have our lovely panel. We have Dr. Kathleen Plinsky, who is our Executive Vice President and Provost. And then we have Dr. Jill Richardson, who is the Vice President of Student Affairs. And then we have the amazing Dr. Isis Arce Vega, who is the Vice President of Academic Affairs. Thank you guys so much for joining us in this conversation. We truly appreciate this.
Today's topic is about allyship into the Black community. There is challenges that Black students face on college campuses across the country. Black students can experience a variety of difficult situations, contributing to much greater psychological distress than their white counterparts, being victims of microaggressions and racism. Dr. Plinsky, we'd like to ask you today, what is Valencia implementing to promote inclusion and ensure the success of its Black students?
Thanks, Anjanette, and thanks, Denasia. First of all, just thank you for your leadership in organizing this series and for creating the space for these conversations that are so important. I started working at Valencia about 10 years ago, and I was drawn to work here because of Valencia's core beliefs, which are known as our big ideas. And one of Valencia's key big ideas that shapes our work and shapes our culture is that anyone can learn anything under the right conditions. And that big idea to me is truly inspirational and fundamentally anti-racist. And it means that if we see differences in success across students from different groups or different backgrounds, then the college hasn't yet been successful in creating the conditions necessary to support all of our students. Right now, we do see a difference in the graduation rate for students of different races and ethnicities. And it has given us pause to ask, what is the college not doing well enough to support the success of all students? And in particular, what is the college not doing well enough to support the success of our Black students? And I'm so pleased to be joined by Dr. Richardson and Dr. Arcevega as we share more about the ways in which we're asking students about their experiences and understanding the conditions that we have created at the college that have not served all students equally well. I think it's important to note that just last week, we had our first conversation with the college's Board of Trustees about Valencia's next strategic impact plan, which will outline the most important work for the college in the years to come. And we have been explicit about including goals and measures that address and advance racial equity. So for example, when I mentioned that we have noticed that graduation rates are different across students of different races and ethnicities, we will include in our strategic plan a goal for the college's graduation rate to reach 50% for students of each race and ethnicity. And we believe it's important to be explicit about racial equity in the standards that we hold for ourselves. For example, if we achieve the 50% graduation rate overall, but one group of students had a graduation rate of 80% and another group had a graduation rate of 20%, I certainly would not be satisfied and would not consider that a success. Our success, our standard of excellence, is in creating an environment where all students feel welcome, feel valued, feel respected, and in our ability to identify and create the conditions to meet all students where they are when they come to us, and to support our students in achieving the high expectations that we have of our graduates.
Thank you so much, Dr. Plinsky. But I would like to touch on, we have talked about this before and in many different like planning days and stuff. The numbers are, when we talk about percents, it sounds very big, but the numbers, could you talk a little bit about the numbers of graduation rate? Because they're not as big as that people think. So I do want to touch on that, on how well Valencia is doing.
Right. And one of the questions that we do receive is your goal too ambitious? Is it set so far beyond what's achievable? And that's where I agree with you. I think it's helpful to look both at the percentages as well as the actual numbers of students. So if you go back to our data from 2013, 2014, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but I believe it's in the ballpark of about if we had about 300 additional Black or African American students who graduate within 5 years, the graduation rate for Black or African American students would have been 50%. And so then we ask ourselves at Valencia, could we create the conditions across all 7 of our campuses for 300 more Black or African American students to be successful? I absolutely think that we can. And that's the work that we are actively engaged in.
Thank you so much. Dr. Richardson, would you like to add in some of our examples of what Valencia is doing to ensure the success of African American students?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. You know, one of the things I want to say, Dr. Polinsky, thanks for just setting the framework for what it is we do at Valencia. And so when you look at our impact plan and the way we want to have an impact on our students and our community, you know, I think one of the keys to that as it relates to our Black students is making sure that it's a place that they feel welcome, and it's a place where they can learn what they need to learn and experience what they need to experience to live out their purpose. And so I want to talk about just a couple of different things that are going on in the student affairs area that lend themselves to those goals. And I want to talk a little bit about the clubs and organizations that we have. And then I want to talk a bit about the work that our college-wide counselors are doing. Before I get too deep into the clubs and organizations, I just want to share something personal real quick for me. So one thing you may not know about me is that where I did my undergraduate, the college I did my undergraduate degree was 6% minority. So 6%. And one of the clubs and organizations that they had at that college was an organization called the Way of Life Committee. And what it was an organization or a club of sorts where students that were Black could get together because we understood our way of life. And we wanted to make sure that we could connect with other people that understood the way of life. And not only was that, you know, just a real meaningful part of my experience in getting through that college, but here's what I want you to know. Some of the people that I met in the Way of Life Committee, I graduated 30 years ago. Some of the people that I met are still my best friends today. And so when you start talking about the power of what these clubs and organizations can do, not just to help you feel like you're at a place and help you understand your purpose, but to create these lifelong relationships, that is a huge part of what we want to do here at Valencia College. So I'm going to share with you just a little bit about some of the clubs and organizations that we have that help facilitate that. But here's also, I want to make sure you understand this, and everybody that's listening understand this, is that the clubs and organizations that I'm talking about, they're open to all students, regardless of their race and ethnicity. And you don't have to have taken classes at a specific campus in order to participate in that campus's clubs or organizations. And here's just a couple of examples of some of those clubs and organizations. And again, the purpose of them is to help our Black students develop themselves, connect with other students, learn more about the Black experience, and then find ways that they can actively join forces together to combat racism and to grow on that journey to being that anti-racist. So on the East and Winter Park campuses, we have the African American Cultural Society. And this organization helps to provide insight into the heritage of African American people. And of course, it helps to promote academic success and also mental health awareness. That's also a part of what the African American Cultural Society, a part of what their standing mission is. On the West Campus, we have the Black Student Union. And again, what they do there is they help identify and act as this educational, cultural center for African American students. Because I'll tell you, even myself, you know, I still consider myself on that journey of learning about not just the history of African Americans, but the history of our country too. And so what the Black Student Union does, they help our Black students and anybody that participates in them, help them understand the political dilemmas that our Black students encounter. It helps promote this positive image of the Black culture. It helps establish open lines of communications, not just between students, but also the administration, the faculty, staff, alumni. It just creates this diverse learning environment for our students. So we're very thankful for the work of the Black Student Union. Vibe Creole, that's on the West Campus. That acts as a unifying body for our Haitian culture. And it provides networking opportunities for our students of Haitian descent. It also helps promote an understanding of their culture and about the history of our Haitian students. We the Culture, that's on the West Campus, that teaches about the Black experience, and it helps our Black students support their own personal development, encourages social interaction, and again, just helps to educate them about the Black culture and about Black history. Now, here's one that I actually want to see in action. I really like this one. So it's called Fearless Leaders Standout Step. And what this club does is it helps develop the creativity of our students through step and dance skills. If you've ever seen a step dance, you know it's absolutely something that's entertaining to see, but it does more than just entertain from a dance standpoint, but they help promote character and dedication and discipline and ethics and leadership, respect, school involvement, teamwork. All of those things are part of the mission of the Fearless Leaders Standout Step organization. National Society of Black Engineers, again, they help to create this culture of responsible Black engineers who excel not just academically, but also in their community environment. And then the Brother to Brother Mentoring Program helps students to discover their own identity, and then it helps give them the tools and resources that they need to overcome some of life's obstacles, as well as achieve academic success with the help of a mentor. And again, there are other organizations that are not specifically aligned under student affairs, but I think it's helpful to know about organizations like the Black Advisory Committee, the Valencia African Heritage Committee, and also the Peace and Justice Institute. So again, all of these organizations are designed to help our students develop themselves, connect with others, and learn more about the Black experience. And then I mentioned I would share a little bit about what our college-wide counselors do as it relates to combating racism and helping our students create the culture and environment where they can understand how to be that anti-racist and understand how to navigate a lot of the social unrest and injustice that's going on in our country. I'll just share real quickly, and this was really in light of what happened with the George Floyd murder, is that our counselors were very responsive to the needs of our students. And they had planned a summer wellness series that consisted of a series of courageous conversations. But after that event happened, I'm very proud of them because they saw the need to actually pivot from what they were originally planning on doing with that. And they actually created a series that was more in line with what they believed our students would need at that time. And this is just an example of some of the titles of some of the sessions that they pivoted to. One was called Reflecting on Emotional Well-Being in the Midst of Social Injustice. One was entitled Illuminating and Reflecting on Your Place in Privilege. One was entitled What the F Am I Feeling? The other one was entitled Lifting Black Voices, talking about grief and racial trauma. One was entitled This Hurts, Racism, the Pandemic, and Our Emotions. And then the final Summer Wellness Series, which I believe is tomorrow. And that one is entitled Reading Between the Lines, News, Biases, and Social Media. And then I just want to kind of close out my initial comments here by saying that yesterday, our college-wide counselors participated in a workshop with the Baycare organization on implicit biases. And I'm very proud of them for doing that because they kind of wanted to make sure that they were willing to do the internal work. And we all have internal work to do as it relates to understanding racism and the systemic nature of it, the impact that it's had on Black people, not just in higher education, but just across our entire country. And I'm proud of them for taking the time to do the internal work, to attend that implicit bias training, to be able to understand where these biases come into play in their lives so that they can recognize that and overcome that and work on that themselves, and then use what they learn to be able to help our students and our staff and our faculty and anybody else that they interact with to be able to overcome those as well. So those are just a couple of examples of some of the things that I'm very excited about the directors of student development that they're doing with our students, with clubs and organizations, and again, our college-wide counselors and their summer wellness series.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richardson. It's kind of enlightening to hear that there are resources and places where we know we can feel welcome. We just have to make the first step. So I want to ask a question to Dr. Isis. What are some racial equality in academics? Like, what are examples of racial equality in academics?
Thanks, Denasia. And first I want to say thank you to Denasia, who's the one who let me know about this opportunity. And I am very excited to be here. I joined Valencia about 1.5 years ago now, which seems amazing. I want you to know that this was one of the reasons that I came here, to do this particular work. It is work that I have done at least over the last decade in supporting faculty and teaching practices that advance equitable outcomes. And it is work that is just so closely aligned with my value system, with the person I am, with the life I'm trying to lead. It is in the way that I parent. It is in my community service work that I do, and just so that this is work that Valencia is doing, and I'm happy to describe these efforts. I also want to call out that it is urgent. When Anjanette talks about the different experiences that our Black students have, I want you to know that rings true. I see my students' faces from when I used to teach and the days that I miss so much. I see their faces, I see their hurt, I see their fear, and it fuels me, and it hurts in my heart. And it is that pain that also motivates me to do this really difficult work. I want to acknowledge the difficulty of this work. It is very difficult, very different from other types of work that we do in curriculum and in teaching and in course design. It is taxing, as most things are when they're this crucial. I want to say that I really need to give credit where credit is due, and so much of what I am a part of at Valencia precedes me. And so just quickly, I want to call out some of those things. I had the great pleasure of meeting Dr. Plinsky and hearing her remarks about the ways that we were advancing equity at Valencia. And there's an authenticity there to this commitment that I had not heard. I had heard many rhetorical, empty claims around advancing equity, and I can tell the difference. And so certainly that was part of the appeal. When I got here, I saw many concrete examples of that commitment. For example, our investments in programs like our Horizon Scholars program, our Bridges to Success programs that really provide these holistic, comprehensive supports to our students and empowerment, right? Letting them know and validating all that they bring to Valencia, all that they have within themselves and in their communities, and supporting with financial resources that often make the big difference in student success. In fact, Bridges to Success and Horizon Scholars and dual enrollment and an LSAMP program focused on STEM, they were bundled into a new unit that I have the pleasure of having as part of my team, and that is called Partnerships for Educational Equity. And so the formation of this unit of itself and all of the strength that comes with a unit with this focus is again a testament to the great efforts. One area of a particular passion of mine, as I mentioned, is the work of equity as pertains to teaching. And so as you well know, right, so many of our students' experiences with Valencia take place in our classrooms, whether virtual or physical or mixed, and with our faculty. And yet so many of our faculty have not had a preparation in what it means to teach across cultures, across race, to teach in ways that are inclusive or equity-minded, right? This is not their fault. It is simply not part of how we tend to prepare faculty. And when I got here and I saw the just depth of knowledge in this area and the recognition that we needed to do more, I saw our faculty raising their hands to be leaders in this work in partnership with the members of my team, the faculty development leaders and the teaching and learning support. It really is just exciting and deeply humbling to see their work. And I'll share a couple of examples. Their approach is both explicit and also infused. And this is something that I have done for a long time, and I think is so important. So on the one hand, they'll have workshops and programming for faculty along the lines of this summer, implicit bias and microaggressions in online learning environments. This is a 5-hour professional development opportunity for our faculty that was so popular that we had to expand and offer more, because our faculty said, yes, we need to learn more about this. We need to know how to notice our implicit biases and do better when teaching online. So something really explicit like that. But by the same token, we prepared 688 faculty in teaching online. They completed a digital professor certification. And my team, in partnership with our faculty, they went through that entire digital professor course, and they looked through the lens of equity, and they said, are we advancing equity-minded teaching practice through online preparation, right? So not only is it explicit in the microaggressions workshop, but in everything that we do, we are cognizant that the students we serve are diverse. And so we must infuse equity-mindedness into everything that we do. I just met with our Assistant Vice President for Teaching and Learning and heard about some of the initial plans for next year. And really, I'm blown away, though not surprised. We're going to support faculty in looking at the student performance in their classroom to notice any racialized patterns, right? Because those racialized patterns that we see at the college level that Dr. Plinsky described, those start with patterns at the class level. And so we need to help our faculty to see those problematic gaps and to notice right, what kinds of things they could do differently in their courses. We're going to roll out some programming around culturally responsive teaching, which is a really powerful way to motivate students to tap into all of the strengths that they bring into our courses and to make learning more relevant, right? So that students can bring their all to the work. And they also want to be explicit in teaching and supporting our faculty in teaching race. And this is not something that we've done explicitly as a college, but if we are going to move to a more equitable world, then we need to become much more comfortable talking about racism, anti-racism, and race. And our faculty are up to the task, and I'm very much looking forward to supporting those efforts. The last thing that I want to share is something along the lines of what Dr. Richardson shared with respect to the counselors in terms of we as Valencia leaders are eager to engage in this work, and at the same time really cognizant that we also need to continue to build our own capacity. We're not pretending that we have all of the answers or all of the knowledge and skills that we need. As a senior leadership team, we have an equity retreat scheduled for within the next few weeks for ourselves. We have an inclusive excellence a speaker series that had some reading and conversation discussions. I have my show and tell here. So for example, I signed up to lead a couple of reading groups. I did one already around Debbie Irving's Waking Up White, a really powerful account of her coming to terms with white supremacy and all the benefits that it brought to her life. Tomorrow, I have the pleasure of facilitating Austin Channing Brown's book, I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness. I also have the great pleasure of being the co-chair of a group called the Learning Council, and the Learning Council commissions work. And it has the opportunity, the responsibility to provide feedback on major initiatives at the college. And so the Learning Council said, if we're going to advance racial equity at Valencia, then we as council members need to improve our capacity as well. And we have spent some time listening to our Black student voices, talking about our own need for growth in this area. And this is the book, like many others, that we're reading this summer. Kendi's brilliant work, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And just, I say this because we must approach this work with humility. Any one of us who thinks that we know how to do this or have all of the answers is going to be mistaken, and our students will suffer the consequences. So it is just a great joy and privilege to be a part of a college that I see is deeply committed to this work. And I am just, again, really honored to be able to partner with you, our students and our student leaders in this work as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arce-Vega. You brought up a lot of great points, as well as with Dr. Richardson. I do want to point out that there are so many opportunities for faculty, staff, and students. We've had, on Poinciana campus, we had conversations with colorism with Dr. Vasquez and one of our advisors, Julix Cardona. I was a part of that series. It was wonderful. Unfortunately, the pandemic kind of sidewayed us as it was a series, but we do plan on bringing that back virtually in the fall. PJI as many opportunities for, I'm actually a seed cohort for the fall on faculty side. And I've also done PJI on the student aspect. So I got to see it from both experiences. But you brought up a wonderful point of that nobody has a roadmap. There's no, it's like parenting. And I will resort to that all the time because I'm in the throes of it myself. And nope, they just hand you this baby and it's the same thing. We were born into this country or we migrated to this country. We don't have a map that's going to say, this is how we're going to become radically anti-racist. We didn't become racist overnight and we will not become anti-racist overnight. So I do want to amend, apologize. I would like to commend Valencia for all the work that we are doing forward. For the students, for the faculty, for senior management, we're really moving in the right direction and we can see it. I want to say from a student and an employee side, I'm glad someone else cares. They see my color is important to me. It's a huge part of my identity. I hate to be told I don't see color because then you don't see me. So I'm glad you touched on that aspect as well. To know that I'm employed and I attend a facility that truly cares and is approaching this in so many different aspects from the classroom to the faculty to policies to graduation rate is really heartwarming. I have enough struggles in the world without having to go into a building that is not on my side. But I can truly honestly say that Valencia is geared towards my success as an employee and as a student. Denasia, I know you would like to add something.
Absolutely. I can honestly say this, of course, coming from a place where they said, oh, we don't see color, or you're not college material, or you're not good enough because of the color of your skin. A place like Valencia, it's a place saying we do care. But what I see is you have to make the first step. You want to be heard, let your voice be heard, even though your voice shakes. So when I do things like becoming a student leader is one thing, but when it comes to being a Black woman and stepping out and getting a higher education, that's another. Because us Black women today, we need so much uplifting. We need so much comfort and protection, of course. So when I think of Valencia and I think of being a proud alumni of Valencia, I think of becoming, making the first step. So as I approach USC, the University of South Florida, I am very terrified because it is predominantly Caucasian. But at the same time, I know that I can make an impact. And it was because of the foundation of Valencia. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Is there anything that any of you would like to add to tell our students of why we care and why Valencia is doing the things that we're doing?
I'd like to just add just a quick story. And this is, you know, I've been here for a little over a year now. And I love to tell the story about when I first showed up in Orlando and I went out to the mall and was just walking around. And I don't think I quite checked in to the college yet. So that was a couple of days away. And I saw a young African-American girl that had a t-shirt on. She was there and it looked like she was with her grandmother. And I remember looking at the shirt she had on, and I remember reading the words, "I am college material." And I thought to myself, that is just that's a cool message. That's a great message. I just love that message. This young Black girl in the mall just proclaiming to the world, anybody who sees her shirt, that I am college material. And then a couple of seconds later, I noticed the bottom of the t-shirt and it had Valencia College on it. And chills went up my spine because that was just another of many confirmations for me that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And I just believe that the message that we send to the young lady that was wearing that shirt and to anybody that comes to our college, regardless of what their race or ethnicity is, that you are college material. And we don't have it right yet, but we will work to create the conditions whereby which you can be successful. We're committed to that. Valencia College itself was formed using the lens of equity. That's in the birth of the college. That's part of our DNA. And just like America, we know we haven't fully lived up to the potential of what we can do as it relates to Blacks and African Americans. But we're on the path and we're on the journey to do that, because our college will never be everything that it can be. Our communities will never be everything that they can be. Our country will never be everything that it can be until we include the potential, the gifts, talents, and abilities of everybody. And yes, that includes our Black and African American students and citizens as well. So we haven't lived up to our potential yet. We're on the journey. We're committed to that journey. Like Dr. Plinsky said, when you put that in a strategic impact plan, what that means is that now you have a mirror you can hold up to our face and say, hey, how you doing? You said you were going to do this. How you doing? And that's a mirror that anybody can hold that up to our face. And we don't mind. We want you to, because we want to be held accountable for what it is that we said we were going to do. Because we just realized that until we do that, as a college, as a community, as a nation, we will never fully live up to the potential of what we can be until we help every individual do the same thing. And we're committed to that.
And I'll just say I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to work with such amazing colleagues who clearly care so deeply and so authentically about this work, as well as the opportunity to work with such amazing students like you, Denasia, and you, Anjanette, alumni like Denasia. Congratulations. And I just think that, so many elements of today's conversation, I think, just resonated with me. And Denasia, you talked about, speaking up and sometimes with a shaky voice. I think that's true for leaders as well, because there's not a map, there's not a guidebook, there's not one right way of doing this. And so sometimes we feel that same fear of speaking into the space, and will we misspeak? And the answer is yes. On occasion we will misstep, but that doesn't mean you stay silent. And I think that if we can get this much more right than wrong, I really do. I don't believe that 50% graduation rate is out of reach for all students. I believe that we will achieve that. And to me, that's not only important for our students, which I care so deeply about, and for our community, which I care so deeply about, but Valencia is an important leader in the country for higher education. And I think it is so important for us to also be able to demonstrate that this is absolutely achievable and within reach, so that we can set the example for other colleges and universities in the country as well.
Well, thought I was gonna cry, I'm not. Okay. I just want to say thank you, Valencia family, for listening. This is an amazing conversation, and this conversation will continue because there will be a fall season. So this is the end of the summer season. This is the last episode, but there will be a fall season and there will be much more conversations. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for being the impact that we need today. And of course, love, hope is all we got. And that's because of Valencia College. So thank you. Thank you so much. Share this. I would say like, comment, subscribe. But thank you so much. Have an amazing rest of the day and keep talking about this. This conversation is needed. Keep talking, keep conversing until someone says, this is where we start. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much.